Guys, and welcome back. I know I've made this video on this subject a few times, but summer's coming and people are always concerned about their engine running hot. So let's make a video on things you can do to make it run cooler. I'll start this off with a story. My sister actually, back when I was in high school, just out of high school, bought herself a Baja Bug. And of course, guess who worked on it? Me. And I got it running for her. She bought it not running, and I did a whole bunch of work to it. Got it running, did a bunch of stuff. And one time when Christmas time came, it was over at my house, and I was working on it before she got it. And I was giving it back to her at Christmas when she came home. And on Christmas Day, I sanded it down. I got up early in the morning, I sanded it down, and I painted the car, and it was all painted by the time she got up for Christmas Day. So she was pretty excited. I painted it like, I'm trying to remember, a kind of a bright blue color. So it was really cool. Baja Bug, 1966, really cool car. Had a 16 single that looked very similar to this in it. And I don't know, so maybe she had about a year, and she said, hey, do you think this thing could do a road trip in the summer? It was like in July, I want to think, July or August, and in the heat all over California. You know, I want to go to like Fresno, then I want to go from Fresno to you know, San Francisco. And I said, you know, I think it'll be fine. Of course, it had Baja size tires on it, so they're really tall, you know, good gearing. So it didn't have really high RPMs on the freeway, which that can be an issue with running hot. Believe it or not, more RPMs can be bad. If you have too many RPMs, it can run hotter. You know, we'll talk about that a little bit later. It was a 16 single, so it actually had no doghouse, okay, stock cooler, and she drove it all over California and did not have an issue. It was over 100 degrees. It was like 105 to 100 and maybe even 115 in some areas. And she did not have any issues. But that was on a Baja Bug. So on a Baja Bug, you don't even have this tin. All you have is what's here. Basically, the back piece is missing. You have a lot of air going to the engine. So Baja Bugs usually can run really cool because they have so much air in there. When you compartmentalize the engine and have the engine shut like this, and all the air that cools the engine comes in only through these little grills right here, it's just not that much airflow. So they do run hotter, and definitely in a car, than in a Baja Bug. Baja Bug, she had no issues. So it can be done. So anyway, we're going to go over some of the ideas that work, some things that some people try that don't work, and let's see what happens. The number one thing I will find with most engines is the jetting is off. I mean, I've seen guys with way too small a main jet in their engine. Your main jet is basically behind this bolt right here. So you take this out. Some of the main jets are actually on this bolt on the other side. Some of them you have to reach all the way in with a screwdriver and pull them out. And the main jet is usually a lot of times too lean. On a dual port, it should be about 130, 135-ish, somewhere in there. Single port might be smaller. I don't know the numbers for the single port. It all depends on what you've got inside it. So what I usually do is I'll go as rich as I can and drive it until it starts to load up, and then I'll start leaning it out a little by little, you know, get the biggest, you know, start with, like I say, a 135, and then start going to a 130, and still runs like crap, then bring it down to 120, 130 to 127. I think there's a 127.5, and then there's a 127, one of those two. And then there's also the 125, and you know, bring it down until it runs at cruise speed the right way. you'll notice that cruise speed if it starts to load up. You know, there's no way to explain it other than that. That's how I do it. So make sure the main jet circuit's the most important one. That's what you're running on going down the highway. That's where your engine's going to get hot. So that one needs to be correct. Make sure that that's right. That's number one. Another thing I'll see a lot on the Beetle, they have this insulation behind here. Okay, the insulation panel is loose and too close to the fan. I've seen them like this close to the fan. That's an issue. That sucker needs to be a good 3 to 4 inches away because you need a lot of air flow going to your fan. So check that to make sure that that is not too close to the fan. Another thing I see a lot is guys got too small of a size of tires. And what that does is that makes your RPMs way too high. Or your transmission gears have not been upgraded and you're driving it like 75 on the highway. It's going to run hot. Too many RPMs is not good for VW. Yeah, they're air cooled. A lot of people think, oh, it's air cooled, so if the engine's running a higher RPM, it'll run cooler. No, they have a threshold of pain in there. It just depends on what cam you're running. So if you're running a stock cam, a lot of times that stock cam, you're kind of out of the curve, out of the power curve for it, and it's struggling, and the engine's working harder to actually run those higher RPMs. So sometimes if you have a performance cam in it, it'll run better at a higher RPM than one that doesn't. So you kind of got to know what's in your engine. So if you got a performance cam in it, it might be okay running higher RPMs on the freeway. But a telltale sign to let you know that you got a problem with RPMs is a lot of times you'll develop oil leaks, especially one that's coming from behind the pulley. The most common thing from that is RPMs are too high on the freeway, or if guys tell me my engine's leaking from everywhere, that means more than likely your RPMs are way too high in the freeway and you need to slow down. So that's, slowing down. I know, you got to slow down, guys. You're driving an air-cooled car that's 40, 50 years old or more. You got to slow down. Now, I'll talk about some upgrades in a minute, but another thing that I've seen a lot of times where people have issues with running hot is they'll have a cooler, not like this one, but usually an old school version of it. These are pretty nice, by the way, on eBay, and pretty cheap too. Is you'll have the guy who has the cooler mounted behind the engine between the fan in here. Already, I just said if that insulation's too close, you've got an inch between here, you've got less than an inch between there, and what's happening is your engine's going to run hotter with this thing located right here. It's better if you take this and move it and put it over to the side above the transmission. There's a lot of air back there, and put one of these fans on it. They have these available. Back in the 80s and stuff like that, it was really hard to find a fan that was that nice. Now they're just like all over the place on the internet. You can find them. It doesn't cost much to do. So there's a lot of improvements you can make now that you couldn't make back in the old days. We found that mounting the cooler, a lot of guys would remove the oil cooler from here and mount the cooler behind, because they wanted more air to number 3, thinking that was going to help number 3 run cooler, which I don't know if it really did or not, because all 4 cylinders would run hotter because there's less air flowing through. You restricted the fan opening, and now all the cylinders are running hot. So that's another bad idea. If your cooler's mounted back there, just remove it and put it somewhere else and put a fan on it. That can actually be an improvement over stock. If you have one of these kind of coolers and somebody's removed that one over here, and you put this with its own fan on it off to the side, it can actually run. Number 3 will run cooler, and also the oil can be adequately cool. It may not be run cooler than it did, but it might be cool enough to work, and you'll have that extra air to number 3. Another improvement that I like to do is underneath here, you'll see there's a deflector plate. I think I've got this one. Yeah, this one has it. Oh, maybe it doesn't. You know, it has it on there. This one has something called Super Cool Tin. I'll put a link in the description for that. Basically, it's a Type 3 cooling system that you put on the bottom. You do this when you build the engine. The heads have to be off at least to do it. And the cool tin goes underneath. And what it has is it has 2 metered holes underneath the cylinders that give it adequate air to the cylinders. And then what happens is the remaining air pressure goes to the heads. So, okay, where does the heat come from the most on a Volkswagen engine? Anybody know? Is it from the cylinders? Is it from the block? Is it from the oil? Where does the fire happen? It happens in the heads. The heads are what your number one thing needs to be, that you need to be aware of, how to get your heads to run as cool as possible. So getting more airflow through the heads makes the engine run the coolest, and it keeps your oil from getting hot. It keeps everything from getting hot. So if your number one thing needs to be head temperature. Head temperature first, then oil temp. A lot of guys go for an oil temp gauge. The head temp is the number one. If you've got your cylinder tin off and you can drill and put a little heat temperature thing in there, they do have them. They're kind of hard to find. It took me a while to find one that goes over, I think, 100 degrees Celsius. So you have to have it go up to, like, I mean, head temperatures on these VW engines going up a steep hill or something, can I get up to over 400 degrees? I mean, you want to think about something for a second. Your water-cooled engine, what's the top temperature, you know, when you have a temp gauge? It's like 260. These things are doing 260 is like, it's normal. That's like not even, you know, hot. That's actually running cool for an air-cooled. They run up to, you know, over 350 degrees running temperature, okay? A lot of times. You know, 280 to 300 is really good. And above that is doable, okay? So just so you know, I mean, these things run really hot. And climbing a hill, it's getting up there. And so because the head temperature on these is so hot, okay, and even though it has a low compression ratio, these engines factory had 7.5 to 1. A lot of us are running 8.5, okay, 8.25, and some guys are running over that, okay. Even because it's, you know, low compression on a regular V8 engine, that would be super low compression. But because of the temperature of the cylinders and the pistons and the heads, we're talking, these things need premium fuel, okay? And back in the old days when they were made, the cars, we had leaded fuel back in the old days. So the only thing you can do to combat against that is to run premium fuel. It does help keep the engine running cooler. So the reason that is, okay, because when you have a hotter cylinder head, your head's hotter, okay, that, you know, heat makes pressures higher. So if you have a hot cylinder head, okay, that normal 8.5 to 1 compression ratio might be like running 11 to 1 because you have so much heat in that head that the pressures are a lot higher in the combustion as the engine's running. So running premium fuel is a smart idea on these. I mean, I've seen guys run them with regular. Guys did back when fuel was really expensive, and even they're trying to do it now. But you better have extremely low compression, not a lot of timing, and you better be listening to your engine. If it's pinging at all, you're ruining that engine. It won't last. A VW engine detonating will kill it in a matter of seconds. It's not even minutes. If you're pinging just a little bit, for a few seconds, it can actually start to cause major issues with the engine. So, because it's already running hot, you know, you imagine that on top of that, you don't know what that cylinder head temperature is up to. It might be extremely high. Okay, if you're building an engine, one of the things you could do to improve your cooling system quite a bit is put a doghouse system. Basically, if a lot of people think this is a doghouse, or the one that's round, you know, is a doghouse fan shroud. No, that's an early fan. This is a fan shroud. The doghouse is a little portion that is on the back side of the fan shroud that and it's not, you have to get a whole new shroud for it, and it goes right here, and then it has a little door down here that comes out of this piece of tin right here, and what it does is it eliminates the cooler from being the obstruction to air to number 3 over here. So more air can get to your cylinders. Included with that is a larger fan. So they had a larger fan, it was a little thicker, and it had more fins in it, and that fan would cool off number 3 a lot better and allow the hot air that was normally going to number 3 going, because what happens is when the stock cooler is in here, okay, the air going through that cooler is hot. So now the air going to number 3, not only is it super restricted, but it's actually really hot air going to number 3 already. So it adds, you know, quite a bit of temperature to the air. So what they did is they put this doghouse on the back, and that doghouse would take the air, the hot air would come out this little port that was on the side, and all that tin needs to be there and on correctly for that to work. So some guys will leave the dog door piece off, and you can't do that. You got to have the whole thing there. And you have to have this tin with that for sure. On a Beetle, a lot of guys run the standoff. So you run a standoff, that's going to do the job. It's like making a Baja Bug. If you really don't care if you get water in your engine, you can do that. The standoffs really make your engine run cooler. But if you don't want to do that, you can take this. I mean, what I used to do is mine used to like get hung up on the bumper, and I would just run it on the bumper when I was on the freeway, and then when I get off the freeway, I'd put it back down. That helped take quite a bit of temperature off. What guys do on the later models is they'll actually put a spacer in here and have it just standing up a couple of inches, and just 2 inches of space in there. As the air comes down, it just goes and sucks right in there. You get more air in there. And for your bigger engine, you know, you got to remember, this car, these early cars, only had one set of grills on here, okay? And they were designed for a 36 horsepower, 40 horsepower engine, basically an engine that had super low compression, very low performance, so it didn't run nearly as hot. And guys are running 1600 and larger engines in these older cars, and or even with the doghouse fan shroud, okay? And you've got all that extra air getting sucked in through these little vents here, and it's very restrictive. So having the deck lid standing up a little bit does help with keeping the engine running cooler. It does. A lot of guys will tell me that doesn't work. You know, everybody, if you've done this already, if you got to stand up, your deck lid is standing off, tell us how much cooler it runs after you did that in the comments. Of course, you guys can read those comments, and everything in this video is my opinion. You can do it or not do it. It's up to you. These are just things that have worked for me. So you can upgrade to the doghouse fan shroud. Huge improvement. Any engine except for maybe a 40 horse. I don't think they will work on those. Maybe they will. But sure, it would take a lot of power out of the engine. Usually 40 horses don't have too much trouble running hot because they had a smaller fan. You know, and you start, you know, putting a bigger fan on a 40 horse, and it might just suck the power out of it. So, you know, be aware that you're going to do that with a 40 horse. This one's a 1776. You know, I'm talking about bigger engines than those. The 36, it's in that. It usually doesn't run hot, even though the cooling system was horrible on it. But you know, it runs a little hot, but not really. You know, it's doable. It doesn't have enough horsepower to hurt itself. So the thing to do is when you're building your engine is, if you really want it to run cool, is do something called full flow the case. And what that is you remove this plug right here. I believe I'm on the right one. No, it's this one above it. This one here, this plug, and you tap the surface, tap it with a tap, and you put a fitting on there. And you like to use AN fittings. It's really nice if you use those, because then you can unscrew those and put a cap on it. When you pull your engine, you'll have oil dripping all over the place. Really nice to use those. And then you put a fitting on here, and you'll run another pump cover. I'll show you what those look like. So you would replace your oil pump cover with one of these with a fitting on it, so that you can put, yeah, guys will run this kind of fitting, but if you switch it to the AN fittings, you can look up what an AN fitting is. It's a little easier to remove the hose when you go to pull your engine, and less messy. But you put one of these on there, okay, and then you run 2 oil filters. So, or 2. You're on your. Usually, what I'll do is I'll put a spin-on filter. I don't have an adapter to show you that, but I'll put on a spin-on filter adapter, and I'll run it through the spin-on filter, and then I'll have it go through a second cooler. So you'll have the doghouse fan shroud, and you'll have a second oil cooler. I mean, this really works to keep your engine running cool, guys. You get a bigger performance engine. Really a great idea. I do everything that's performance I like to do with one of these the doghouse cooler and a full flow system second cooler. So running the 2 oil coolers, you know, the oil almost becomes like coolant. The engine, VW engine, only holds 2.5 quarts, a little over 2.5 quarts of oil, and you know, with this you end up having 4-5 quarts of oil, and just be having all that extra oil, the volume helps it run a lot cooler, because a lot of it's in the coolers longer. So it actually really works to run 2 coolers. Now remember, when you put the doghouse system on, if you're just going to buy the fan shroud and do that, make sure that you get the correct fan. The fan for the doghouse is almost 1/4 of an inch wider than the fans that came on the earlier cars. So they have a lot more airflow going through them. And in fact, they sound a little different too. You can kind of hear the fan whistle. Kind of like that sound of the newer engine. It sounds a little newer. It just sounds good. But those are all things that you can do to help your engine run cooler. Another thing people do, so those doghouse fan shrouds can come with these and without them, okay? Another thing people will tend to do is they'll have these things open with nothing on them. If you have this kind of a fan shroud, okay, and you have this tin on here and you don't have heaters hooked up, so you've got these things going right here and they're going down, and normally there'll be a tube on here that connects to your heater box. If these things are missing, if this hole is open and not covered, okay, your engine's going to run hot. It's going to run very hot, okay? So if you're running this type of a fan shroud and you're not running heaters, you need to get some freeze plugs that fit in this hole. So you can buy at the VW shop, they already know the size, or you can measure it and go to like the regular auto parts store and put a couple of freeze plugs in here. Really, it'll save your engine. You're losing all that air. All that air just blowing willy-nilly all over the place. And if you've got holes here, then what's happening, remember, your airflow on your VW goes through the fan shroud, goes down, okay, and then comes right out of here. Hot air comes out of here. Now what happens when you're going down the road, okay, is the air from underneath, okay, creates a vacuum right here. So all that hot air ends up going back through these holes. So if you've got a bunch of holes in your tin, you need to at least minimally use some foil tape and cover them up, or a piece of sheet metal and cover up those holes, or replace the tin with the one with no holes in it. You really can't have holes in the back side of your engine anywhere. The other thing that another problem that people have from that run hot is they'll have no engine seal. That engine seal needs to be there, you guys. That engine seal, if it's gone and you have air gaps in here, as you're going down the road, that hot air that's coming from underneath the car, it goes underneath the car and out of the back of the car. That's how it was designed. As you're going down the road, it's supposed to go out of the back. But what happens is you've already got a vacuum on this side of the engine, and it's sucking that air in, okay? Because the fan's pulling air over here, and that's creating a vacuum inside of here a little bit, you know, maybe not even a measurable amount of vacuum, but it's a little bit. Plus just the natural airflow of the air going from behind the car wants to go back up in. I mean, if you ever have a station wagon or a VW bus and you leave your back door open, drive down the road, all the fumes come inside. So that's what happens, is it sucks its way back up in there. All that hot air goes back up and it gets sucked back into the fan. You just start recirculating hot air over and over and over. Your engine gets hot. So having no holes in your tin, I mean, there's a little piece of tin that goes right here, okay? And if there's a little bit of a leak right here, it's not going to cause that much of an issue, okay? These definitely do. These are a big problem. And if those are, so now if you've got these missing and you've got these missing, now you've got, you're losing air volume going to your heads, and you're leaking air back up into your engine compartment. And so you're really running hot, guys. Make sure you have all the tin on there. If this piece is missing, it's going to run hot. So, you know, all the tin needs to be there. You know, the more tin, the less holes you have in it, the better it's going to run. So those are basic things there. The things I'm talking about more in this video are upgrades that you can do to make your engine run cooler. You know, the full flow, not having the holes, having a doghouse fan shroud. Literally, your car can run super cool when you have all those things. Real quick, I just wanted to touch on this. If you're climbing a hill and you hear any pinging, if you hear the engine pinging or detonating is really what the term is for that, that detonation is death. You need to let off the gas, slow down. If you have to, drop a gear and make sure that engine is not detonating when you're climbing a hill. In the summer, you know, this is the way you ruin an engine, okay? You climb it, you're detonating. The first thing that's going to happen usually is you're going to get it hot. You may not know you got it that hot until you stop. And usually what happens is the heads are going to come a little bit loose. So what we do, if you have this happen, if you already had it overheat and we're a little too late, it still can be savable. You'll take the valve cover off and you remove the rocker assembly. And what we call this is retorque the bottom four. So you'll torque these two back to the original spec. If it's a 10 millimeter stud, that's like 24 foot-pounds. If it's a 8 millimeter stud, the size of the stud, it's going to be 18. So you'll retorque those bottom four, and then put your valve train back on and readjust your valves. Because usually the first thing that happens when you get it hot is you're going to get a tight valve. But when you, at the same time, most of the time your heads are going to come a little bit loose. So if you've gotten it hot, the best thing to do is to right away check those valves and retorque those heads and get it back to, you know, to a savable condition. That's going to be your first warning. If you get it hotter than that, the next thing to go usually is the piston. Number 3 is just going to go out. you're going to pop a hole in number 3. And then, you know, it's a rebuild situation then. But it'll give you a little, sometimes it'll give you a little warning check. If you're getting a time where you have to pull your valve covers and retorque your heads and adjust your valves, that's telling you your engine is running hot. You need to figure out what's wrong. Another thing you want to do when you're rebuilding your engine is make sure that your castings are open. You take your heads and you put them up in the light. Remember, your heads are your number one source of cooling. And if your heads are hot, running hot, everything's going to run hot. You're going to have oil issues. You're going to have all those problems. But what you want to do is, okay, there's supposed to be a little deflector shield on here. That should be there, okay, because you're losing airflow through here. That should be there, a little air deflector, little piece of sheet metal. Okay, and look through those ports, the air ports we call them in the head. So like down here, make sure you'll see some poorly designed heads that they were making for a little while. Like this one's got a bolt in there. That's no good. See that? I'll clean that, take that out of there, because that's restricting airflow. And make sure that those are all, the castings are not there, you know, and there's no mouse stuff. You know, a lot of times if you have an old car, you know, a lot of guys will just, you know, they don't pull the fan shroud off, pull the tin off of it. If it's been sitting for years, pull that stuff off and clean the mouse out of here, okay? Because if this is restricted, your engine's going to run hot. And you may not even really know it. It just starts to smell like cooking mice, you know. And if it smells like that, you know, it's no good, guys. You pull the fan shroud if you've got a car that's been sitting. Usually what I'll do if I have a car that I just bought or whatever that's been sitting for years, I'll pull the engine, I'll pull the fan shroud off, I'll pull the tin off, okay? I'll clean this, okay, if I'm going to run the engine the way it is. But I think I started up, it's got oil pressure, seems to run good, doesn't smoke, okay? Pull all that stuff off, clean this out, make sure that all this is clean of debris. I've seen just leaves in here, and that'll kill it. That just ruins the engine. And clean it out, and then I'll replace the push rod tube seals. And at the same time, when I do that, okay, if it's a performance engine at all, usually what I'll do is I'll put those super cool tin on there. I'll put a link in the description for those from AA Performance, and you'll see what they're like. And I'll put those on, and they need to be wired on. You can't just snap them in place. They need to have, you need to modify them a little bit, because the way they come, you take baling wire and wire them, drill some holes in the 4 corners and wire them in place so that they stay in place, they don't fall off. Because if they fall down, it's going to run hot. So guys, I think I've pretty much covered everything, you know, that I can think of without getting crazy here. But if you go through and you do all those things to your engine, more than likely, you're going to find yourself a lot happier in the summer. And, you know, another thing is make sure your timing's right on. A simple thing. That's another simple thing I just remembered. A lot of guys will have too much timing in it, you know. I mean, if it's pinging, it's too hot, you know. Retard the timing a little bit if you have to, if your timing's up too high. It shouldn't be, you know, the average timing is between 28 and 32. Some cams will want more than that. If you have a big performance cam in it, not enough compression, sometimes that is necessary to even get it to run right. But, you know, if it's pinging, your timing might be too far advanced. So that might tell you the timing's too far advanced, or, you know, you might have an issue with some areas that are plugged, you know, like if there's debris in here, there's leaves got sucked into the fan. It's a good idea to pull that fan shroud and just check it, so you know, have a basis of whether it's right or not. So anyway, that's it for this, guys. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.